All right. Hi again, everyone. Stephanie with the patient story, back with Jason. We just got through talking about how, Jason, you got diagnosed, what it was like in the hospital, all the scans. You really took us through a lot that happened in such a short period of time. But now we're at the point where, you've been at the hospital for so long, then they say you need to start chemo right away. And in fact, I see it was, the day after the diagnosis, you
Yeah.
got the first chemo infusion. So before we dive into what the infusions were like, how did the oncologist or your specialist describe the treatment you would be going through?
So I don't necessarily, I think we talked more about the prognosis and how everything would work, but I don't really think I got that great of detail about the chemo treatments. I think the pharmacist that was brought in maybe gave me a little bit more of an update because they talked about the different varying medications that I'd have to take and how they'd all work for me as well. But that it was a bit of a surprise. If I could maybe just throw one thing in, the day before you go for your first chemo, don't eat any food that you will ever want to eat ever again in your life. There's a certain restaurant in my hometown that, it was a Sunday night. I think my friends took me out for a bite to eat. The smell of that food to this day, I think I could probably get sick if I walked by and smelled that restaurant. So I know everyone, wants to bring little snacks and stuff like that. If there's something that you enjoy eating and have for a long time, have your first chemo and maybe not bring it around just to make sure that you don't have a kind of an adverse reaction.
Right.
I've heard it's similar to the way that some women crave certain foods or don't like certain foods when they're pregnant. And you could end up ruining certain types of food for yourself permanently.
Hey, that's a good pro tip, and I know
Mhm.
that people react differently, but why
Yeah,
risk it?
yeah,
No.
absolutely.
Just have oatmeal or something.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it was really okay. So interestingly, you didn't go through the treatment plan as much. It was more the pharmacist who said, "Here are the different drugs you're going to be taking." Did the pharmacist at least tell you, this drug, it's A, B, V, D. This one might mean this, or was it really, hey, this is the regimen, and you'll figure it out when you get it?
So the doctor gave me a breakdown of like the treatment. She didn't really talk about how they would how it would feel going out through it. And I think the chemo nurses did at the hospital when I started treatment. I think they did a good job of explaining further. Um, I feel like I probably learned the most about the process from them. They were definitely more hands on with that. So
Yeah. Wait, I
uh,
just have to say shout out to the nurses. I'm glad you brought that up because they are such a lifeline. And it's true, different people on your medical team will provide different kinds of information. Those nurses are with patients all the time. They know so much and are such a gold mine of information.
and I was young. I'm still young-ish, and I like to chat, and I try to have a positive attitude. So I developed a great relationship. In fact, I think 6 months ago, right before COVID hit, I was up there because I go every 6 months for checkup. And every time I see them, I get a giant hug from them. They still remember me. I still remember everything about them. I mean, they were with me at some of the darkest times in my life, right? And they'll always have a piece of my heart.
I love that so much. Yeah, I still keep in touch with a couple of the nurses too from my chemo treatments, and they are so awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love them. Okay, so you go through ABVD. It's 12 infusions. It's six
Yeah.
cycles, but it's two infusions per cycle.
Yeah.
So overall, did it take it was two infusions a month? Was it about 6 months?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay,
I think it started June 13th, and I think it ended November 12th
or
or
14th. Yes,
something.
you're right.
Yeah, 14th. Yeah, yeah.
November.
So
Um,
I had, yeah, every 2 weeks.
so can you describe, so it's once every 2 weeks. Can you describe, so did you go in one day, how long the infusions were? And then maybe you can talk about how you passed the time. Did you do inpatient or was it outpatient?
It was outpatient. So I'd usually have my chemo on Monday. So Friday, I'd have to go up the Friday before, get my blood work done just to make sure that my levels were strong enough for me to be able to take the chemo. And then I'd usually, be there 3-4 hours, I imagine. And it's the weird thing, the weird part about it is, this is supposed to cure you and make you better, but when they're wearing rubber gloves and like almost hazmat suits and can't get a drop on you or them, it's like, it's a little nerve wracking, right? It's a little scary. But yeah, I would, basically just bring my iPad. I own my own business, and part of coming through the other side of this is that I realized how I needed to take a break and appreciate things in life versus just being a workaholic. So I was still working when I was getting chemo. I was working for the 2 weeks I was in the hospital, still not knowing what was going on with me. It was just unfortunately in my nature. So yeah, I'd just bring my iPad and a lot of times I'd have friends that would come sit with me.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst. I developed some great contacts with people that were also sitting in the chairs. Each
Yeah.
room in our hospital would have 4 chairs, and you just talk. You're there for that long. You're all fighting the same battle.
Right.
And yeah, I developed some great contacts, and I developed one friendship with a guy that was having treatment with me, and yeah, just yeah, I mean, it's this weird, you're part of this group, and cancer just it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, how much money you make, how old you are. Everyone can be impacted by cancer. So it's the most random group of people that are put together here. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. I really,
Yeah.
I met all different types of people. It was interesting, and because I like talking, it helped pass the time talking to people.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And we hear right when we get diagnosed, it's like that's the club that we're all part
Yeah,
of. None of us signed up for, but hey, we're here. And it's a
totally
really strong community too, which is
agreed.
a beautiful thing. And I have to ask you, Jason. So I know it was 12 infusions. Did you get a port or a PICC line, or was it IV each time? And what led to that decision?
So I was having problems with my veins. I didn't have a PICC line until I think probably after the 4th treatment. So, kind of a quarter of the way through I had it, or a third of the way through I had it. I had one put in. So I had a PICC line from that point on. My veins were really hurting. I was getting a lot of pain in both my hands. I guess they can't find the veins in my, so they had to do it through my hands, and it was starting to be really painful, and then bruising really bad and stuff. So I had a PICC line in, and the last treatment that I went for, number 12, it was like a new nurse, and she pulled out the PICC line.
No.
Uh, yeah, so I had to end up getting it done the same way. But yeah, it's a weird feeling. You can feel, different temperature for some of them, or just the way they flow through your body. You can feel it from all the different ones, all from the A, B, V, and D.
Did you like the PICC line? I know sometimes for people it could be a hassle with the showering and whatnot. What did you find with it, and what helped you?
Again, getting needles and stuff like that doesn't bother me. I have no problem getting it. I found it to be a bit annoying, but it was nice when you are going through chemo not to get poked a bunch of times, So I found it was a bit of an inconvenience, but I also felt like I think it sped up the chemo every time as well. It knocked a little bit of time off. So again, I knew that there was a finite expiry on how long I had to have it. So it was just part of the process. It was all part of, moving forward and getting better. So
Did,
annoying, but it wasn't the end of the world.
right, right. And it helped in some ways. Did you have to saran wrap? They say you can't get it
Yeah.
wet. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you went about it in the
An
shower.
arm out the shower. Sometimes I'd hang one out. Yeah. Putting saran wrap around it. Yeah. There's also, like when people have surgery on their legs and arms, there's like a full thing you can get. And I try to tape it to my body. It was like a million different things. I was taking baths at that time as well.
I'm gonna do one where I'll just kind of tell people
Yeah.
what worked for me, but and it's not an endorsement like officially, but I really liked it. And it was just this sort of arm band that you put over, and it just completely contained it. So anyway, there are things that people can find, but it can be a hassle sometimes.
Hmm.
I'm gonna bring up a photo that you shared. You said it was around the first chemo or maybe going into
Yeah,
chemo with
right
the
around.
black cap. Can you describe, and we will talk about the bleomycin right after, but I would like
Yeah,
to understand the side effects. So you get the infusion on Monday, it's 3 to 4 hours. When would you start to feel them? What would you feel? And then if you could share with people if you found anything that actually helped you through them.
sure. So I found that a lot of the prednisone kicked my butt. It just made my face, my entire body was like completely bloated, and in fact, even in this picture, my face is bloated. Just I'm still dealing with the blood clot here. You know, I'm still dealing with some of the side effects. Um, yeah, it's funny to look at that picture. I don't really see myself in that anymore. Um, yeah, this is yeah. Looking back at some of these old pictures, I've not really looked at them since I sent them to you to have this. So they bring back memories that, for a large part, I've not blocked but moved on from in my life. When you asked a question about what the treatment was like and how I felt, I think you walk out of there the first day feeling fine. You feel a little spacey. I don't know. You feel like it's almost like you're having a little bit of an out of body experience. I don't know how to say it, but it seems like it's just there's just a weird feeling. But the next day, I at least felt like I got hit by a truck. I'm always amazed and I appreciate when people are like, "Oh, I'm back to the gym," or "I'm still going for a jog." I was not getting out of bed, like at all. I was not getting out of bed, and the prednisone and taking that, and then taking some of the medication, and then I think taking some of the pills that then make you feel constipated, and then you're not feeling great. Like I really felt, when I'd get home in the first couple of days, I was toxic. So I had to use the restroom downstairs. When I brushed my teeth, I had to be careful that I didn't get, any of my toothpaste anywhere. Couldn't kiss my kids. I couldn't kiss my wife. I couldn't do anything, right? It was really, I felt like I was I was toxic, which I was, but it was a weird feeling not to be able to, hug my kids or anything like that.
Yeah, especially I know you're really close to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, did you feel nausea? And I know, so you were in bed, you said, so fatigue, I
Yeah.
imagine, was
Yeah.
pretty bad. But with the nausea, did you get mouth sores? Any of those side effects?
Um, no, I didn't get any mouth sores. What I found was, when I started to lose the hair on my body, my eyes got really dry and my nose wouldn't stop running. You'd be surprised how important nose hair is actually until you don't have it. And then you're, yeah, it can be difficult to not have nose hair. That's for sure. Yeah. Your nose is constantly running. Um, yeah. I also, we'll talk a bit more about some of the side effects, but some of the other medication that I was on had other impacts on my body. I was on a really strong antibiotic for a while, actually two of them, and it doesn't just kill if they think there's an infection, it kills all the good and bad bacteria in your belly. So it really messes with you and messes up your digestive system. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of antibiotics unless they absolutely need to be
Right.
taken. And
Are you saying also were bowel movements impacted? Because for a lot of people,
yeah,
constipation, diarrhea, all these things, and especially constipation. And sometimes, to your point, it's the medication for the side effect that then brings on other side
yeah,
effects, and then you have to take more things.
yeah.
What helped you with the bowel movements?
I think after like day one, knowing that I'd have to take these pills before I left, the hospital, I think I started to like make sure I took like stool softeners and things like that, just to make sure that you had to be proactive. You'll have to figure out what works best for your body. But I don't think that keeping yourself constipated is the
Yeah,
position you want to be in. You're already in,
right,
a really uncomfortable situation.
right.
You want to do what you can do.
And Jason, I feel you when you say you're not into, taking pills and stuff. I have never, like, in the past, I've had like headaches and I just ignore them. I wouldn't even take a
Yeah,
Tylenol. But I really like you're bringing up this point. It's being proactive, being preemptive, because by the time you feel the side effect, usually you're going to feel awful, and it's a little,
yeah,
too late to sort of to take care of. So thank you for that. And I
for sure.
know the hair loss, you know, is something people dread. So could you talk about that, when you started to notice the hair starting to go, and yeah, how you dealt with
Yeah.
it?
So I think I didn't even allow my hair to really start falling out. I have a friend who's a hairstylist, and I think the week of my first chemo, after I felt better, I went to his salon and he shaved my head, and then from there, this is my permanent hairstyle now. My hair. I know everyone talks about how great their hair grows back and how thick and curly it is. My hair never grew back, so this is my hairstyle for the rest of my life. Thankfully, my head is in okay shape.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. So you have an easy life now with the hair, because it's, you don't take care of it, and
Yeah.
you haven't had to deal with COVID hair, so that's another thing. Um, so okay, so I know hair loss is one thing, and then you had a more major reaction to one of the drugs, the bleomycin, and it has a lot to do
Absolutely.
with the asthma that you already had. Can you describe what happened and also what made it better?
Yeah, for sure. I first noticed, a real heaviness in my chest, and it felt like I had like a really bad cold. I was worried I was going to get pneumonia. But what I ended up having, so I had chemo started in June. August in Toronto is pretty hot. Probably, I'd guess, 80s, 90s. It's very hot in Toronto. And I took my son swimming at the pool, and I got out of the pool and it was hot outside, but I couldn't stop shivering. And then it eventually developed into like convulsions. Um, and they're called Rigers, is what I had. And I had a crazy high fever. So over probably a 3-week period, I was in the emerge 4, 5, 6 times. I was in and out. They were trying to figure out what was going on. And that's when they had put me on really strong antibiotics. They thought I was having a reaction. Um, it turned out that it was bleomycin lung toxicity. And that was something that I had been looking and researching and brought to their attention versus them bringing it to my attention. So once they finally listened to me, and we did some breathing tests and some scans on my lungs, it was determined that I did have the bleomycin lung toxicity. So they removed that from the regimen. It seems that there's a pretty chemo is pretty successful at even removing the B from it. So we removed it from the regimen. I think the last time we had it, I think they loaded me up with Benadryl, and gave it to me, and I still had that reaction, and then they had to wheel me from the cancer center over to the emerge again. So it was a pretty rough experience for probably 3-4 weeks in August, the year I went through it. It was a very, very, very dark time for me. We spoke earlier, and I told you that was the one time that I actually felt like giving up. That was the one time where I didn't want to keep going on with it. I had such a crazy fever, and then I'd get these like crazy convulsions. It was terrible. I felt like I was going to die. And at some point I probably thought, if this is going to keep going on, I think I want to die. I don't want to keep going through this. It was so terrible. It was the worst medical experience of my life, for sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds really dark and isolating. And it also sounds like you weren't really being heard by the
Hmm.
medical team. And of course, we defer to the medical experts, but we do know our bodies the best. Did they
Yeah.
not know you had asthma, and they weren't concerned about that with the bleomycin to begin with?
No, they knew I had asthma. I was on an inhaler, like my inhaler. You know,
Mm.
I had an inhaler when I was even in the hospital for the first 2 weeks. So I'm not sure, it wasn't until that point that I actually had a respirologist join my team, along with the radio oncologist and the hematologist. And, that's when we started to put a plan in place. And lo and behold, when they took the bleomycin out, I didn't have those problems again. Then it was like, mid-September, kind of rolled around, and I was like, all right, I'm feeling alive again. I'm feeling good again. Let's just get through this. We have 2 months left, right? So it
Uh,
was a big change after we took that out of it.
I am so glad you advocated for yourself. This message of self-advocacy pops up in almost every single story.
Mhm.
Any last message about that you want to let people know?
I think, doctors are human, and the medical, it's not a perfect, diagnosis every time, right? So you do need to advocate for yourself. And I think that's a lot of times the way that even some people get diagnosed, initially is by advocating, and even, my partner is a breast cancer survivor and had to, go to 3 different doctors before the lump in her breast was actually taken seriously, because she was in her early 30s. So I think that is a big part of this, is your body the best, and we talked about that earlier. Your body the best. If something doesn't feel right, you need to advocate for yourself, and don't stop at the first answer that you get.
Right. Don't just say, okay, I want to be a good patient and listen. It's about
Yeah,
being there for you. So
yeah,
thank you for hitting that home, Jason.
yeah.
Wrapping this section up, I just want to ask, so you'd gone through all these 12 infusions, outpatient. Your last ABVD cycle, infusion was November 14th. Did you have PET scans in the middle and at the end of treatment? How did they track how you were doing? And when did you know no evidence of disease?
I think it was December 14th or 17th. I did my PET scan, and then I think it was December 21st. I got the call from my radio oncologist that it came back clear. One of the happiest days of my life, excluding births of children and things like that. One of the, just a rush of positive emotion. I think it was a long haul to get to that point. And I knew I still had, not only some radiation to go through, but also I had a hip surgery that I needed to have done separate from the cancer as soon as this was done. But it was the first big hurdle I needed to get over in order to get my health and my life back on track.
And it's just nice to get positive news,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
especially after going through something like this ABVD chemo and the toxicities that you had to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to ask, because you did still have radiation, even though there was no evidence of disease. They wanted to keep on with the plan, right, to do this
Yeah.
radiation. Describe for us how often you got the radiation and what it was like.
I had 18 blasts of radiation, and I think it was almost daily over, like, I think it was from the 2nd of January 2017 to maybe the 20th of January, something like that.
You said the
Um,
18th,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It was that to me was, I know a lot of people find mission can be challenging. To me, I had already heard the good news. So this was like, okay, you're doing this just to make sure it doesn't come back. I was all for it. I mean, it's awkward. I think I was in a machine, they do like a mold of your body and you have to stay there. And out of all of the tattoos I have on my body, those are still 4 of my favorite ones. The X and Y axis that they have to line up the lasers, right? So um, yeah, it was the home stretch to get that done. Um, there, I think I was more emotional with some of the people that I saw, because I saw people that were, battling with brain cancer and things like that, and you'd sit in the waiting room and see that, and I think that hit me a lot more. And I think I also, in some ways, probably felt a little bit guilty that I was doing this and was better and already free of cancer. Um, and other people were doing this maybe as a last ditch effort to try to either prolong their lives or give themselves a little bit better quality of life. So I think in some ways I felt guilty. And then there was also this crazy rush, as I said, being like a hypochondriac. It's crazy. I know unequivocally right now, for the first time in my life, that there's no cancer in my body. Like, it was like a weird feeling, right? That I knew that I was cancer free. Like, I had tests done to prove it. And yeah, the radiation was really a non-event as far as how it impacted me. But I think the emotional part of, again, the guilt that I was feeling, and then just watching people, and still to this day, going to the hospital really impacts me emotionally. Seeing I see people that are fighting the fight that maybe are not in the same position or not as fortunate as I was. And that really impacts me. It really, really plays with my emotions big time.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's you have a big heart clearly too. And what you're talking about with this guilt, people will say there's no such thing as good cancer, but I think it doesn't stop you sometimes from comparing to other situations. And look, at least the upshot is appreciation, for the situations that we can find ourselves in. So the radiation, before we move on to the next section, I know you said it was a non-event physically. Can you just describe, though, in human terms for people who are about to go through radiation? I
Yeah.
mean, it can sound a little scary, what the prep was like. You're talking about the mold and the tattoos, and then how long each session was, and did you feel any side effects?
So I think there was maybe a general feeling of being a little run down from it. That was the only real side effect. I never got like the radiation burns that I know some people do. My partner, again, going through breast cancer, talks about how bad her skin burned. I never had any of that. It was also very targeted, and it was in and out. It took longer to set the machine up, I think, and make sure it was exactly right than it did to actually have the treatment. It is daunting to look at it because it looks like you're like going into some like weird space vault. So that's the weirdest part about it. But again, to me, it didn't, I didn't have any pain or anything from it. There was a sense that, you realize the power of that, and what the repercussions of getting radiation are, I think, as well. So, I mean, that was in the back of my mind, that am I potentially causing myself any secondary cancers down the road by having this radiation? Now, they were pretty pointed on the mass in my chest, and then I had a mass on the lymph node in my neck. So those were the only two areas that they kind of directly pinpoint targeted. So it wasn't like my entire mantle was blanketed. So, I felt a little bit better with that.
Very targeted, and it sounds like it took like minutes for you to get each sort
Yeah.
of blast. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Say thank you, Jason. So we're gonna wrap this, and one of my favorite parts of these interviews is talking about the reflections, quality of life. We'll talk about self-advocacy maybe more, but it's really mental health, physical health, attitude. And if you're interested in that, hearing from Jason, just click on the next video.